Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. If you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. I'm also a founder of Clever Photographer, and every week on Monday, usually around 5:30, 6 o'clock p.m. UK time, we meet here and review your photos. Now, I hope you all had a great week. I hope you took your camera out and capture some new images. And I hope you're ready for more photography reviews. Now, in today's episode, we have a lots of beautiful pictures. It's a mixture of different photography styles. We have some landscape, wildlife, macro, flower, and also portrait photography. So it's going to be lots of fun. Now, if you've never been with us before, the way to join us is simply heading to our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership, and there you can sign up to our Clever Photographer Plus membership, which will allow you access to our photography review show every week. It will also allow you access to our Clever Photographer Academy group, and most importantly, you will get a monthly bundle full of photography digital tools. Now, the monthly bundle is usually between 200 or 300 assets, and it has everything you can imagine, including presets for Lightroom, Luminar, overlays, textures, skies, backgrounds, brushes, custom brushes, all fun stuff, always bundle in one theme. So, for example, for July, the bundle was summer portrait photography, and now for August, it's going to be summer travel photography. So that's how you join us. Now, I can see that some people joining us already. Guys, welcome. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for watching live. As always, to start it with, I would like to ask you to say hello wherever you are down in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. So join us and make sure that you write somewhere or under the post wherever you're watching. Now, this show usually runs live on our Facebook page, Clever Photographer, also on our academy group, and also on YouTube. So wherever you're watching, look for the comment section and just say hello and where you from. In the meantime, I will very quickly explain how we're gonna do the review show. So we always pick the picture and we look at the three parts of the image. We start by looking at the technical part. That's where we look at the camera settings and also closer at things like sharpness, exposure, noise, and stuff like that. So that's the technical part. After that, we look at the artistic part of the image. That's where we look at things like composition, storytelling, main subject, and everything else, just the overall feel. And finally, if I think that there is a chance for me to give you some advice on how you could edit your images, we also look at the editing part, and I give you some tips and tricks on what you could do differently in the future. For the editing, we're using Luminar Neo. However, really, most of the stuff I do in the application, you can do in other photo editing software like Lightroom Classic, Lightroom On One, and so on. So this is all out of the way. Looking at it, we have Tony with us. Tony, thank you very much. Welcome back. I saw some pictures already. Again, this week from you. Thank you for sending them over. And let's see if we get anyone else. But in the meantime, we're gonna minimize me and maximize the screen and get ready for the reviewing. Tony, breezy in Essex. Yes, same here. Actually, the weather has changed several times in the last 2 hours. Everything from blue sky, sunshine, to rain, to gray sky, to cold, to misery. So later on, I'm heading out to play football and it's going to be joy. However, there's nothing to complain about. We are where we are. And this is the proper British weather. So it's all good. Zdeněk is also joining us from South Africa. Zdeněk, thank you very much. Good evening to you too. Thank you for joining us all. And since we have everything ready, we can start. Folks, let me just pick a few photographer or the first photographer. And we're gonna start with David. David, 2 images. So let's start straight with the first one. We have this bridge with a golden hour feel on it with lovely colors. So let's see. So it was captured with Sony 7 Mark II with the lens 28 to 70 millimeters. Now, looking at the camera settings, we are on ISO 200, 28 millimeters, f11, 1/640th of a second. Now, the ISO is perfectly fine. Yeah, generally, as always, the advice is try to keep it as low as possible. The f-stop, yeah, f11, not necessarily for a scene like this when you're shooting so wide. F7.1 would probably do too. However, looking at the shutter speed, there isn't really an issue, as probably there was plenty light anyway. Now, looking at the overall image, it has a lovely light coming from a side, so kind of side light with warmth. When you zoom in, the sharpness isn't 100% when you really zoom in. However, that could also be with the resolution and the size of the image and the fact that it's in JPEG format. So sometimes these details just go. In overall, you can obviously see everything. And it looks quite good. Now, generally, I'm wondering if I'm wondering if you could go a little bit slower just to avoid so much of a texture in the water. So obviously that would need maybe a tripod, maybe ND filter, or wait a little bit longer. But that would be something maybe I would try, because with this shutter speed, you can see lots of texture created with the ripples on the water. It's not that big deal. It's not a mistake. It's more as a suggestion and maybe something to try for a future. Now, continue looking at the image. I don't see any noise neither. It's quite well done. I wish there would be a little bit of texture in the sky, but it is still pretty anyway. The colors, the combination of the orange and blue work quite well. So in overall, I think it's very lovely. Now, when it comes to composition, obviously the main subject is the bridge, and that's clear, so that works quite well. I think it's quite cool that the cars are on it, because it gives us a sense of scale. We get an idea on how long it is. So that's really good as well. Now, in overall, I think for the main subject, looking at it, probably captured with 28 millimeters, it it's kind of almost lost in the image. So where you would really want to show the bridge and show how big it is and really highlight it with so much sky and so much water, it's a little bit, it's kind of, yeah, it's losing the power of the subject, I think, a little bit. Now, there are different ways you could do this, but I think one way, since you're already doing panorama, is to crop it even tighter. I think there is lots of water and lots of sky, which is not really necessary. So what I would do, I would just really go like a panorama style, very close crop. So let's say something like this. We could use the rule of thirds. Let's say that we will keep 1/3 of a sky and 2/3 of the rest. And I think, yes, each side is important there. Of course, that you could crop it a little bit from here, but it's not necessarily. I think it's nice that we have a little bit of a bridge there. And then when I hit enter, you can see how the bridge really stand out, how much of it comes out, and how the main subject becoming much more powerful. So that would be what I would do there. Otherwise, I think it works quite well. I think it's a lovely, lovely image, and it's very well captured. Now, moving on to the second image. So this is another water seascape with lots of clouds and beautiful sky. Obviously, I'm assuming, looking at what's behind here, you were maybe on a ship or a boat or something like that. And that's the result of it. Now, looking quickly at the technical part of the image, this was captured with Sony 7 Mark II with the lens 28 to 70 millimeters, so same equipment. Looking at the camera settings, ISO 200, again, same thing, 31 millimeters, f11, 1/640 of a second. So except the lens, pretty much exactly the same settings. It worked in the first case, so quite well done there. And when I look at the image, it's true that because the light isn't that interesting, obviously some parts just kind of disappear, and maybe the light isn't just that crazy. However, it's still interesting image. I mean, when I look at it, I always think about first impression. And when I look at the image, the first thing I think you want to show me is the sky. It's all about the sky. It's very pretty. Yeah, we get the beautiful clouds, which then reflect in the water. It's very nice. but everything else is a little bit small and far, and it's just working as a partner to the sky and as a base for the sky. This is where I think you've done quite well with the cropping and framing. I always think that when the sky is like your main subject, the thing you really want to show, then you should use the rule of third and keep 1/3 of the ground, which is not that important, and 2/3 of the sky really showing it up. Now there is a lot of sky. However, I think in this case it works. In opposite, when you wanna show the land is your main subject, this is where I usually go for 1/3 of the sky and 2/3 of the land. So in this case, it works quite well. I would crop it down a little bit, just a little bit less of the sky. Again, I think it's just a little bit too much of it, so maybe just somewhere around here if you want to keep the shape, and just do something like this. If you wouldn't want it that panoramatic, maybe then you crop a little bit more and get something like this. That's about it. I think in overall it's a little bit too blue for me, so I would remove a little bit of the color cast, and maybe in an HSL panel I would go into the saturation and just bring the blue down just tiny bit, just somewhere around here. Still, very, very nice pictures, very panoramatic views. I really like the first one with the bridge and with the lovely light. Very well captured. The second one is also interesting. Obviously, again, it looks like it's a lot about the sky, which is very nice, reflecting on the water. So, David, thank you very much for sending these pictures over. It was my pleasure to review them for you, and I hope to see more of your pictures in the future. In the meantime, let's jump into the comments. Jan from Copenhagen, Denmark. Hello to you too. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for watching. Then we have a message from Stefan, Levittown, PA. I'm not exactly sure what it means, Stefan, but we'll get to your pictures soon. Moving on, we going to Macro, and who they from? The person I was just talking about. Stefan, let's have a look at your images. Flower pictures, flower captures, first one, second one. So let's have a look at it. Starting again by looking at the technical part of the image. Sadly, neither one of them have any camera data on it. That's a little bit of a shame. It would be great to have it because it gives us an idea on how it was captured, and I can give you a little bit more feedback on the image. However, looking at it, we can do a little bit with just what we see. So let's just kind of zoom in. I think the sharpness is very decent on this one. Obviously, you can easily recognize the main subject. The color is quite nice. The light is quite nice too, although it's a little bit strong, especially on the background. You can see some of the highlights here and also on the top. However, the main subject is clear. I quite like the framing. I think it works quite nice. Again, the details and structure is lovely. So I think that works quite well. Now, when it comes to the artistic part, to the framing of the image, I quite like it. I mean, immediately you know what you're trying to show us, trying to show the main subject. I also think that for these big pictures of flowers, like when the flower is really your main subject, it really works very well when you crop it almost like a square, just create a really nice impact and impression immediately. I also think that the contrast work very well here as well. You have the green, darker background, and then you have the flower, and really the flower with the different colors really stand out and create a really nice view. When it comes to post-processing, what I would do, I would darken the background definitely, and I would add a vignette. Now, let's see if we can maybe darken the background here with just Relight AI, which basically just adjusts the brightness of the near subject and the far subject. So let's have a look if we can maybe try that. Not too much, just somewhere around here. And I think on the top of it, what would work quite nicely is a nice vignette, just adding more attention towards the flower. Now, when I show you the before and after, it's quite gentle, but I think it creates even more impact and more contrast. Moving on the next picture, shame, Stefan, that it's really small resolution and small size as well. So when I look at it, anytime I zoom in, I see immediately pixels. So that's a shame. just always try to send as high quality as possible. It's just make it much easier to give you some hints. But still, it's a lovely picture. Now, I prefer the light on the first one. I think this one is a little bit stronger, but in your what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that actually, even though the sun is quite strong, it's not distracting. The shadows are not super harsh here, so that works quite well. Actually, the light coming from this side work quite well too. It's just here where maybe it's a little bit distracting. But in overall, it's quite nice. And compared to the first image, this is a good example on how darkening a little bit the background actually really helps the flowers to pop out. So sharpness I'm not going to judge because of the resolution of the image, so it's more about the actual storytelling and composition of the flowers. Now I think, you know, when it comes to composition and the numbers, I think 1, 3, 5 works always really well. This is why the 3 works great here. Also the direction they're pointing at, I think all of that works really well too. Again, the contrast is quite nice with the flowers having the kind of pink, yellow, red color on a green background. That all works really, really well. And it's just nicely done. Maybe the background is a little bit too dark for me, just a touch. So as you can see, the first one is too bright. The second one maybe too dark. And I think it's just a little bit too visible. I would not darken it as much. Maybe a little bit, but not as much. But in overall, still, it's lovely. And I can really see that you have a good eye for composition and a subject. So it's just the editing, maybe something what to adjust a little bit. However, still both very pretty pictures, and with a little bit of editing, I think you could easily just fix them and then maybe print them and have them on a frame. This is really, really nice picture. So thank you very much for sending them over. It's always my pleasure to review them for you. And I hope to see more images from you next time. Now, looking quickly into the chat. So Stefan is from Levittown. Now, okay, let me check because I am not 100% sure where it is. Levittown. Let's see. Levittown. Is it Levittown in New York, United States? Maybe you can just write me in a comment so I know. Moving on. Be moving to John. John, I've seen this image before somewhere. I definitely seen this motorbike, and it's really, really cool. Really nice street photo. And then the subject we seen over and over, and it always works. So let's start, first of all, by talking about this first image. And as always, starting by looking at the camera details. So this one was captured with Nikon D3 with 85 millimeters lens, f1.4. Now from the camera settings, ISO 100, 85 millimeters, f1.4, 1/800 of a second. All good there, obviously with the ISO 200, pretty good there. 85 millimeters, yes, on a prime lens. f1.4, actually giving us a really cool image here, focusing on the bike, really starting with the sharpness from here, and then lovely kind of depth at the background, which is almost blur, but still visible. And then also this pillar, just creating a really nice depth, working really well in a composition. I think it's all really nicely done. It's a great, great picture. I really like that. Now, that brings us nicely to the artistic part, to the composition. I think the red really stands out here, and the overall edit with the fade, with a little bit of grain, with the colors, almost kind of pastel colors, all of it works really, really well. I really like it. I think it's very well done. It's a great example of that kind of really trendy street-like photography. And this is almost like an image you could use for an ad. I think it would work really well. Well done. I'm really, really happy what you've done here. I think it works great. Again, the sharpness and everything works great. And it's a mixture of many things right together. You have your depth with the one layer middle ground with the main subject, then the background. You have the contrast of the colors. You have the kind of pastel toned down colors around, and then that really strong red on the motorbike. You have the motorbike hidden behind the wall, creating a little bit of anticipation from the viewer. I think it's just great. Very, very well done. I love it. Also, the light coming from behind really works here. All of that just super well done. Well done, John. Thank you very much. Now, moving on the image number 2, a little bit of portrait photography. So I'm assuming, looking at the image, that's more of the 85 millimeters. John, I wonder how you finding the 85 millimeters. I had a friend with me in France who had it with him, and he struggled to start with, and after that he enjoyed it a lot. But for the first part of the shooting, he wasn't really sure about it. But this looks great. Now, looking at the camera settings, we are on ISO 200, f1.4, 3200 of a second. Now, from the camera settings, again, everything spot on. Obviously, it's a brighter day anyway, so there's everything set right. Now, what I'm more interesting is to zoom in and see the result. So let's see, with 1.4. Actually, I'm quite impressed by the depth. I think it's really nicely done. We have the sharpness on the face and on the eyes, and because you far, it's not that kind of sharpness where like you are only sharp on the eye and then 1 inch behind you already soft and 1 inch forward you already soft. I think it looks really nice and natural. The light from the side, I think, works really well as well, creating a really nice scene. Personally, I would frame it maybe a little bit more tighter. Maybe now when I'm zooming, I would probably go for something like this. Again, just counting on the fact that, you know, there is a lot of extra here, which is not necessary. And then the bottom part also not completely necessary. So I would maybe just go for, maybe this is too much, maybe just for something like this. Yeah, the light again is great. The softness and the depth looks really good as well. You know, you can see some people, you can see objects, however, they really nicely soft and behind. Again, I think the pillar here creating really nice depth as well. And it's just very lovely capture. John, I'm really impressed. And sadly, I'm not going to be able to tell you much because I wouldn't change much. I would crop it a little bit tighter, just as you see here. Maybe, so let's crop it. Let's take the image into edit module. Let's crop it a little bit tighter, somewhere like here. And after that, what I would do, I would just darken it a little bit more from this side. So minus exposure, not too much, something like this. Yeah, maybe just here. And once we do that, just maybe a little bit more, which I think will create a really nice contrast between the glow from this side and the main subject from this side. So just something like this. Not a big change, but maybe just adding a little bit more kind of selective local adjustments to the image. Anyway, John, lovely image, lovely picture, love the lens, love the results. Well done there. The back is great, and the model subject again very good here. Really nice work with the depth, with the light. Well done. Moving on. Next is Tony. Tony, let's have a look. Tony, 5 images. Now, let me have a look quickly. Starting, we have some flower photography again, and just like always, you know, I'm always fascinated by your composition. I think it works really well. This is again very interesting. Now it's a little bit noisy, but as a framing and composition, I think this works really well. This is also very nice. I really like this. You have these little like a seeds or inside of the flower with the main one here. I think that works really well as well. The color, the contrast, the subject, I think it all works well and it looks great. Then I have something like a garden hose. Oh yeah, there is, how do you call this? Grasshopper. There is a grasshopper on it. Now it's interesting. I'm wondering if this is before and this is after. If that's the case, I would probably crop it even closer. I don't think the edit is wrong. I think it works quite well. Although I would probably remove the collar from under him, but that's fine. But I would definitely crop it closer. So something like, let's see, something like this, I think. You could keep it really cinematic, go for something like 16 on 9, and then just really crop it to something like this, for example, which I think would make it interesting. I just think that there is lots of extra width if you leave it the way you had it. Maybe it's a little bit too tight, maybe a little bit bigger, but maybe just somewhere around here. I think, yeah, I find the color a little bit distracting because You have the background, which is a certain color. Then your main subject is the same color, so it kind of blends together. And then really what's standing out as a first look is the hose, is the color on it. So that's a shame of the composition. I understand. I think the edit is lovely. I really like the earthy colors, the natural edit. The sharpness actually end up being really good. But when you never seen the image before, when you look at it, the first thing you notice is the color of the host with the color on it, simply because it's a contrast to the rest of the image. So I would just have wished that he would be standing on something else. However, still lovely, lovely attempt. And after cropping it a little bit closer, I think it works quite nice. This, your scones, we're gonna keep for next time, but I hope you enjoyed them. I also really like scone with jam and cream. Now, question, very important question, Tony, is if you put the cream first or a jam first? That's a really important question. Okay, moving on and looking at least one more image. Sadly, your images, except the grasshopper, have no data from the camera. So just looking at this one, for example, it's a Canon 50D captured with 200 ISO, 55 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/160th of a second. ISO 200, quite good, no problem there. 55 millimeters, so wide but close enough. F5.6, giving you this quite strong blur at the back, but I think it works. And 1/160th of a second for the shutter speed. I don't know what the light was. I think it works quite well. It's maybe a little bit on a darker side, but I think it works. Obviously, the main sharp element is this part here, but in overall, I think it works quite well. As I say, for the composition, I would maybe make it just a little bit wider. Just I think you maybe a little bit close to the edges of the image on these sides, but that's about it. I think the edit is nice. I really like the purple feel. I like the warmth here in this part, which really immediately attract the viewer's eyes. And I think it just works. So well done there. So very well done. Great edit starting from here, coming to here. Again, lovely composition on this one. I really like and enjoy your eye on this composition. This is also very well done. And in overall, thank you so much. Thank you for sending your images over. I hope the weather will get warmer soon. Moving on, and this time looking at Zdeněk. Zdeněk, how is the weather back home? Is it improving? Where we are now? We are middle of July, so I'm assuming you're still in the middle of winter. So hopefully for you, it will be warmer soon. However, for us here, I hope we're still gonna get summer. So looking at the two images we have dry flower in a vase with a black background, little bit of wood there, interesting capture. And then we have a similar fabric, I'm assuming, with some grapes on candlelight and more grapes in front. So looking at the image, just quickly keeping a corner of the eye on the comments, Zdeněk is saying that in the morning it's still around 0 degrees. Well, I'm sure that's cold, yeah. But hopefully you will get warmer weather soon. But continuing with the images, starting with this one, Canon 77D, 24 to 105 millimeters on the lens, and looking at the camera settings. ISO 100, 39 millimeters, f9, 3.2 second. Wow. Yeah, ISO 100 spot on, 39 millimeters. We know that's kind of semi-wide view right here. F9, making sure that everything is in focus, which I think works. Or maybe you used focus stacking again. I'm not always able to say, but 3.2 second is quite long. So then my question would be what kind of light you used. Now, looking at the image, everything is sharp. I think it looks good. Just the light is a little bit harsh from this side. You can see some of it here on the sides. Also, it casts a little bit of blue color. You can see it again a little bit on the grapes and this part. And I don't really mind it for the main subject, but I think for the fabric on this, it just creates not necessarily balanced image. You have a lot of light here, introducing the fabric, and then you have a really dark here. So I've just, yeah, I think I would try to look for light or for a way how you can diffuse the light more. Piece of white fabric, white sheets of paper. It really depends on what's the source of the light. When we were doing some course on product photography, some guys were just putting a white bed sheet over the window and shooting right next to the window. That's also an option, just something to do with the light to avoid the harshness from the side, which on some subjects work, but I think here it's a little bit too visible for me, because then you could also avoid the 3.2 second on the shutter speed, which would make the colors just a little bit more natural, and just everything would look a little bit more smoother. So that's about that on that. Now the composition is lovely. Obviously you have your grapes creating the kind of foreground, then you have your grapes inside. The dark background with the fabric on this one, I think on the second one it actually works quite well, but on the first one I'm not 100% sure about it. But I think again it has to do something with the light, so that's just something coming from this side. There's lots of texture, lots of details which are standing out. I think that's quite cool. But in overall, it's nice capture, and good that you keep trying and testing on what you could do with these images. Let's have a look if we could remove quickly a little bit of color cast, just a little bit somewhere around here. And let's see if maybe a little LUT wouldn't help us to make the colors a little bit more something stand out. Let's have a look. Maybe something like this. Give it to little purple haze from a side. Creative sometimes create nice effects. Again, maybe the purple. Maybe that would work nicely if you would kind of just apply it selectively to that part of the image. Maybe less saturation could also work. Let's finish it off by looking at this one. Just maybe something like this could work quite well. Now with the vignette, I would put the subject here and close it a little bit more. Let's have a look what we could do. Maybe just a little bit here. After that, I think a little bit of warmth, and we could add it with the golden hour slider. So it's just somewhere around here. And definitely, I think all the details and everything is a little bit too sharp. So what I would do, I would apply to it a little bit of a mystical tool, which just kind of smooth everything and make it a little bit more interesting. Now, if I would have a time, and if I would want to play around with it, what I would do now, Zdeněk, I would apply to it something like a fine art texture. Let's see if I can quickly find one, because I think that could look really interesting. So let's have a look if I quickly jump into probably, let's have a look, summer maybe, background or textures. 1 second. Summer warm pastel texture, maybe something like this. Let's have a look at it. So we apply the texture on the top of it and increase the opacity, then apply the, maybe not screen overlay or soft light maybe, then we switch it around and we bring it down a little bit. So by doing that, we actually making it look almost like a fine art painting. And I think that's quite cool. So let me show you before and after. Let's just close this. Before and after. So just something to play around with it. And I think for this image, the fine art texture could really make the difference. Now, sorry for that. Sorry for taking too long, but let's quickly move to the next picture. This one is, even the name says dry something. I really like that. So it's a dry plant or flower in this vase. Similar background, different surface it's standing on. The light is a little bit nicer here. Maybe it's same, but it just doesn't have that much to push on. However, again, it gives you this kind of blue haze here. Looking at the camera settings, I think the camera settings are fine. You are on ISO 100, 35 millimeters, f9, 1/3 of a second. So there's nothing wrong with those. It's more about how to work with the background, how to work with the light. And I think the first thing, looking at the images, both of them, the first thing I would try to figure out is how I can diffuse the light more. Now, when I lived in Scotland, I used to work with a photographer who went to like a home base, or like the cheapest, or how you call it, like a cheapest place where you buy industrial stuff and like tools, and he bought really really strong, the strongest light they had, and they had them for like engineers, the strongest light, but super cheap. He paid, I don't know, $50, but he wanted as strong as possible. So it was this massive light, definitely not made for photography. However, after that, he put a white carton in front of it, and it created beautiful light. And he used to photograph whiskey bottles for like a companies as a production or product photography, and he made a lot of money. And that's what he was using. No expensive flashes, just super strong light with white cardboard in front of it, and it really created beautiful images. So I'm not saying that you have to use that, but that's just an option. So yes, light, that's one thing. When it comes to composition, again, the 3 works really well. It's a lovely place. I think the mixture of, I think you're going for natural look. You have the wood, you have the nice base, you have the flowers, but then you have this really kind of strong semi kind of glazed fabric, which I think doesn't fit the rest of the scene. So that would be my opinion there. Maybe other people would disagree, but you have this kind of earthy tones, pastel tones, and then in the middle of it is lots of this black. So I think maybe I would try different thing. It's just question of combining things together. Now, I have spent lots of time on the first image, so I will leave this one. However, just keep trying different things. I think maybe it would be interesting. As always, thank you for sending your images over. It was my pleasure to look at them for you, and make sure that you keep shooting, that you keep taking pictures like this. We have 2 more photographers. This time we have John. John, we have I would say wildlife captures, animal captures. And this is beautiful. Oh, I'm very impressed. Beautiful, beautiful details, beautiful background, lovely framing. Very well done. Well done. So let's have a look at it. John, we have Nikon Z6 with 70 to 300 millimeters. Looking at the camera settings, ISO 1250, 250 millimeters, f5.6, 1/80th of a second. Obviously, the ISO is high. There's no hiding from that. However, for wildlife photography, sometimes that's what has to happen. So it's not a big deal. Most importantly, even with such a high ISO, when I look at it, my first impression and my first look isn't distracted by the noise. I look at it and I don't see noise, and I don't think, oh my god, there's so much noise on it. No, so you have managed quite well there. f5.6 with the length of 250 millimeters give you really this strong depth and softness at the back, which works really nicely in this case. 1/80th of a second, again, with the light and everything works really, really nicely. So it's a great capture. I can't keep looking at it. You kind of want to look into his eyes, and the texture works really, really well. The background, I think, works well. Obviously, there is some depth, especially on a stop and the rest of the body, but this part all being in focus, I think it works really well. Well done on the capturing this. Now, for the main subject, again, I think it works lovely. I'm quite happy that everything on the top is in a frame, so it's a close crop. There's no hiding from it, but I think in this case it works really well. You have kept space in front to give it a little bit of breathing space, and yeah, I think it works. I love the edit as well, the natural edit. I think it works really well. There is no need to push something out of the image, especially on these natural captures. I think it just needs to have a nice colors, nice light, nice sharpness, and that's about it. There's no need to push it with lots of extra sliders, and I think this works really, really well. Well done, lovely capture. And on second image, I wonder if it's the same animal, but no, it isn't. No, now when I look at it, probably no. Obviously, different capture. So let's talk about the camera and lens and camera settings. Again, now we are on Nikon Z6, 70 to 300 millimeters. So if I am right, the same gear. Different camera settings. This time ISO 900, 300 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/80th of a second. Now, looking at it, the ISO 900 we already talked about. I think that's fine. There's not really too much noise. 300 millimeters, so really zoomed in. Again, with f5.6, giving you this really soft background. And 1/80th of a second, giving us good light. Now on this one, I think the depth is a little more distracting than on the first one. You can see how his eye isn't exactly in focus. You get a focus on this part of the body. Everything is sharp. Definitely here as well at the bottom. However, the eye is a little bit out of focus, and you have this quite strong and quick move into the depth. So although on the first one, because the subject is really not close, but because the subject is really cropped to this cropped framing, it works. On this one, you can see it a little bit more, and personally, I find it a little bit distracting. Not a big deal, but a little bit distracting. Also, when you look at it, the framing is kind of a little bit strange. So you have this wood kind of poking away, then the animal, you don't know if he's walking up or from the side or everything. So I just don't know. You look at it and I find it a little bit confusing. That's all. The black background works quite well. It's more kind of grayish, so that's not a big deal. But what I would do probably in overall, I would just crop it tighter again. There's lots of this tree which I don't think is necessary. I think there's lots of this dark area which again I don't think is necessary. What I would do, I would probably turn it around. So let's say I would go like for 4:5, turn it around like this, and just make it even a little bit tighter and end up actually with something like this, which I think is much more powerful. Also, the distraction of all the different elements is away, and you end up with quite nice picture. After that, I would see if there's any way I can maybe bring more sharpness to this part. Sometimes the details here in Luminar Neo works a little bit more, so something like this, which I think helps a little bit. You can then apply masking, just making sure that we're not sharpening anything else. And on top of it, I would add stronger vignette around just to create something like this. So before and after on the sharpness. And yeah, I think this is just a little bit more powerful image after the cropping like this with a little bit more intensity on it. Still lovely. Lovely captures, both of them. I am impressed by the lens as well. Well done on capturing both of them. It was really great fun to review the images for you. And that brings us nicely to the last photographer of the week, Ken. Let me quickly open my messenger because I know that we got a message from Ken saying, where do I have it? Talking about his image. Ken was saying, so this is a green heron, and this one is obviously a bumblebee on the garden. So starting with the green heron, again captured with the Nikon Coolpix. Now Ken has been sending his images probably for almost 2 years now. And obviously the Coolpix camera does have its limitation when it comes to sharpness and also the noise. However, his eye for composition is always great. And also he really goes out and captures lots of animals, and it's always lots of fun to see it. So on this image, it's a Nikon Coolpix. The camera details aren't always correct, but let's say that they are. It's ISO 220, 432 millimeters, f7.1, and 1/500 of a second. So ISO 220 is quite good. 7.1 gives us even the sharpness all the way, even with the long lens, which yeah, is quite good. 1/500 of a second. Obviously, the light at the back is a little bit harsher, but in overall, it's quite good. As the composition goes, it's nicely done. You obviously have the main subject, which is immediately clear. I love the amount of space around it. I think it works well. The bird in a movement with the beak pointing that way, I think works really well too. What I would do, maybe again, similarly to some of the pictures earlier, I would just apply a little bit of vignette, adding more focus on the main subject. So something like this, maybe close it around, and maybe in overall, I would just remove the saturation a little bit and maybe just add a little bit like this. For the second image, we have the bumblebee. Now, I have to say on the second image, I don't think the bumblebee is really in focus, and also it's cropped away, which I think is a little bit of a shame. Now, I think it's a lovely subject, obviously nice thought with all the flowers and plants. However, I think the animal isn't in focus. And I think when it comes to framing, I wish that it would be all, if you're capturing bumblebee, you would like it to be in a center as it's your main subject, maybe with the flower around it. So this is a little bit all over the place, and also it has a lot of noise on it. Still, looking at the camera details, we are on ISO 100 millimeters lens, f5.6, 125th of a second. So this one need a little bit of work. I am impressed by the amount of noise with ISO 100. That seems to be strange, but there is a lot of it there. F5.6, again, I think the sharpness of focusing went away because it really isn't sharp. And 125th of a second, actually the light, looking at it like this, seems to be quite good, quite nice and diffused. But I think first thing first with this image, what you need to do is you need to look at the sharpness and make sure that the main subject is in focus. And for the framing, just to make sure that the whole main subject is in an image. So that's all about this one. Folks, thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Photography Review Show. From some of the news from around the world, on 19th of August, on a World Photography Day, I will be leading photo walk in the heart of London. We're going to be starting at the Tower Bridge Hotel at the Tower Bridge, where we're going to be doing some photo editing right there for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And after that, we will go and start at Tower Bridge in London and walk alongside the river all the way to Westminster, where we will end up with some golden hour sunset colors and have a lots of fun there. Throughout the photo walk, I will talk all things about Luminar Neo, photo editing, street photography, and it will be lots of fun. So 19th of August at 4:30 by the Tower Bridge. I will be sharing lots of information about it in the upcoming weeks. If you're around, I would love to see you, love to meet you, and love to meet you in person. So that's what we're going to do there. If you have a time, come and join us. Luminar Neo released Panorama Stitching extension. If you haven't seen it, we have a tons of videos on our YouTube channel. And that's pretty much it. Folks, have a lovely evening. Thank you for joining me again. Stay safe. Send us more pictures for next week. And until next week, bye-bye.